Yeah, well, aside from being an absentee parent, Dominic has painted me in many different lights over the years, thank you. But I am truly honoured to be here today, and I'll be even more honoured if I can get my slides to work. Oh, what's that doing there? Oh well. Yeah, I actually think I only started, and thank you, Ray, so much for doing all of that Dominic loving, because otherwise I would have been tempted to spend my however many minutes I've got up here doing the same. I loved what you say about Dominic's subversive spirit. I've had a lot of fun sitting on panels, sitting on round tables with Dominic, and I have an innate Bolshevik desire to take on the establishment, take on those vested interests. But when Dominic is at my side and on my side, I really know we've got something, because he will only take that attitude when he has the data, when he's worked out the argument. And I have, through my years since I came across Dominic, looked to him to endorse a particular argument, precisely for that reason, that you know you're on the right side when you've got Dominic Hogg's blessing. And I've only just realised sitting here actually that I kind of have looked to Dominic a little bit like a godfather in this, and I went back, as I was sitting at the back earlier, and looked at my first email to Dr. Hogg, and it was after reading Dominic's food waste stuff about managing bio wastes in the UK, and I remember reading that for the first time and thinking, this guy, his brain is, I really relate to it. He's just analytical, but clearly dedicated and passionate. And I went like this. Why didn't you talk about my pet topic? And there is a prize, and you can interrupt me. Actually, you can interrupt me throughout this talk, whatever, conversation. I hate talking to people who already know more than I do about my own subject. And there's so many people in this room for who that applies, but so please stop at any point, correct me. You are all in Dominic's team. I know you love to pick up on nitpicky and big scale issues, but so please feel free to stop me. But if you, apart from Dominic, can answer the following question: what single policy change would turn 100 million tons of waste into Germany? Then put up your hand, stop me, and you get a prize at the end of my talk. 100 million tons of waste into Germany. Right, I'll move on. Think about it. We'll get to the end and we'll get to the answer. What? No? Okay. So, yes, I think, and I also kind of weave back to the end of the previous session, which is, how do you turn findings of the type that has been embedded in Dominic's work and in many other documents and bits of research, how do you turn what we know to be the case into the global transformation that we need to achieve in order to save the environment from the imminent destruction that we are daily committing upon this earth? That's been my challenge. I think, I started on the issue of food waste when I was a mere 15-year-old feeding my pigs on my school canteen waste and the local bakery waste. Realised most of that food was fit for consumption, started to eat it myself, used that as a demonstration of the injustice of food waste and started campaigning on it publicly. And eventually, I was engaged in writing one book. I got round my second book to writing the global food waste scandal, and that's when I realized just how big a problem food waste was. And I think in retrospect, the choice of food waste as kind of my issue, which has now been my central issue for the last nearly 10 years, it's kind of like an optimism born of despair. when you look at everything we have to achieve to stop deforestation, stop mass species extinction, arrest climate change, all of these colossal problems, we have a vanishingly small chance of actually achieving that if what we want to avert is mass species extinction, if what we want to save is biodiversity on the planet. Look at the trends. They are all not just going in the wrong direction, but still accelerating in the wrong direction. You choose an issue like food waste, and by God, we have achieved something in the last 10 to 15 years. There has been a global awareness cataclysm. It's been incredible. And that has even been reflected in some changes in behaviour. 21% reduction in household food waste since Dominic wrote that 2007 report. 21%. It's very difficult to find an environmental movement, an environmental campaign anywhere on any subject that has achieved mass behaviour change on that scale, as well as a matched policy change from industry and from government. So we have this kind of enormous success story, and like I say, by parceling out a single issue where there are battles that we can win, you can give yourself cause for that little chink of optimism that maybe we can do it as a society. So for me, food waste, it is a big issue in and of itself. A third of the world's food being wasted. Translate that into any parameter you like, whether it's carbon dioxide emissions, whether it's land use. That is a huge opportunity in and of itself for resource efficiency. But it also becomes, I think, a window for people, a very accessible window. Anyone has encountered that bag of lettuce gone brown in the fridge. Everyone can look at an image like that and be incensed that 1,000 tons of citrus fruit being grown in Peru, where there are chronic and accelerating problems with the water table, namely that the export agricultural sector that has boomed in that country to supply our supermarkets with fruits and vegetables, drilling further and further down into the water table, resulting in the situation where they're now going to replumb the Amazon basin and drill a hole back through the Andes to bring water to these plantations because there's none left in the soil. And then 30–40% of what's being grown with all of that water and land ends up being tipped into a hole in the desert because you probably can't even see it. It's an almost invisible skin blemish that has no impact on the quality of the fruit whatsoever. But Morrison's and the other supermarkets in this country that are buying this citrus say, no, anything like that. It's too big, too small, whatever. And you know some of these smallish farmers in Peru who have grown it, fed it into the system, and they're not being paid for anything that has these irrelevant skin blemishes. It's our businesses, we're paying for that. We are accountable for that. So anyone can look at that and just think, wow, that's totally bonkers. And hopefully thereby engage in a more substantive way with all of those other massive issues that we also need to tackle, whether it's marine litter, whether it's deforestation per se, whether it's meat consumption, all of those things we have to grapple with, and grappling with it in a tangible way is the way in which, since I wrote my book where I laid out all the facts, I've really tried to focus on. And I think, like I say, it loops back to that discussion we were having about marine litter. Yeah, picking up a few bits of plastic on a beach is not by itself going to save the planet. I give you that. The gentleman from the plastics industry, not by itself going to save the planet. But you do that, you build a community around it. You don't just add up the tonnage of waste. Is it the Stewardship Council or Conservation Society who's involved in that? MCS. I'd love to help, work with you on your litter picking campaign. One of the things that we're doing with food waste in the States, we haven't done it yet, but we're going to do it, is working with a Norwegian artist called Lisa Wolf. Get all that rubbish and make an enormous face in the shape of Munch's scream, Take a photograph on one high, you've got a shareable image, you galvanize a public behind the issue that you're trying to promote, you send that message to policymakers. The outcry, the outrage of the destruction of planet Earth for no good reason, that is how you build a community and change policy and change the world and change civilization so that we stop destroying the planet for no good reason. Which brings me on to wonky asparagus, also in Peru. You probably all saw, both Jamie Oliver and Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall are two best-known chefs in this country, and indeed globally have picked up the issue of food waste in the last 12 months, 24 months. And by God, you get something for 5 minutes on a Jamie Oliver programme. The needle changes, all the supermarkets. Instead of rejecting these things, they're actually clamouring to get hold of it. You can change, I'm not kidding you. Farmers are struggling to find enough ugly flipping asparagus. And that's not just a UK issue. I'm telling you, in Canada, Australia, the United States, all over Europe, it started here in Britain with our campaign on ugly fruit and vegetables, and it's everywhere now. Walmart, Loblaws in Canada, Woolworths in Australia, they're all doing these ugly fruit and vegetable promotions. And it's by galvanizing the public, and these are the similar story, onions being dumped in the desert. This is all Peru, by the way. This is the last trip that I did on this overseas supply chain investigation that we're doing on European and American supermarkets, funded now by both UNEP and the Rockefeller Foundation, seeing the transformational change that we've brought about. And here in this country, carrots, most of these are rejected because they're too long. They don't fit inside the packets that go into the supermarkets. What we've done over the years is try to single out, again, that's that optimism born of despair, try and single out this little thing that we can win on. And the thing that we chose in 2013 were these beans. And these beans, anything that's bent or twisted or not perfectly green, I'll draw your attention to the word Kenya here. These are grown by farmers, by and large, farming 1 or 2 acres in Kenya, trying to feed their families. And anything that's not perfectly straight and green and the right diameter, rejected. But the pinnacle of this absurdity was the fact that they would get these finalist beans, and then to fit them in to a punnet that was exactly 9 centimetres long. Obviously, the beans didn't know they had to be 9 centimetres long. So they grew 14 centimetres, 12 centimetres. 15 to 20% of the bean was being wasted at this final stage. And we looked at these enormous mountains of bean trimmings. And no one in Kenya eats beans because it's Mzunga food, it's white man's food. There's no market for it. So at very best it was going to cattle, but by and large, sitting in the sun in Kenya, just be rotted. And think of all the land and the water in this country with millions of hungry people going to, anyway, we campaigned on it. It was an obvious thing where the supermarkets in this country were vulnerable. We also drew attention to the fact, on top of that, entire harvests were being wasted because of order cancellations, again from our supermarkets, so that ladies like this would destroy an entire crop of basil without picking a single leaf because of an order cancellation from our supermarkets. And they explained, these are day labourers. These are the people least able to afford the risk in our market, the risk being the vagaries of supply and demand. Okay, it's there, but who's going to bear that risk? Obviously, that should be the big businesses who are most empowered to do something about it, and not this person who has least empowerment, both to withstand the risk or do something about it. But they are the one that bear it. They get paid half wages when an order is cancelled and they have to destroy a crop. That means they can't feed their families, can't get their kids into school, and sometimes they say are at risk of losing their homes because of these completely ridiculous causes of food waste. That was tackled through the Groceries Code Adjudicator Act, not a perfect piece of legislation, but in 2013, the UK Parliament passed this landmark piece of legislation saying to supermarkets, if you're going to cancel an order, if you're going to amend a forecast, you have to bear the cost. You cannot just dump it onto your supplier anymore. Transformational change. Passed through legislation. We can bring about the kinds of changes. So to bring it back to the beans, we really nailed them on that one. When we did some of our absolute classic campaigning events where we tried to galvanize public opinion and enthuse people about the easiness of solving this particular problem, we do these Feeding the 5,000 events. It's one of our landmark events. We bring a whole load of organizations together to coalesce around particular asks, but also to build that community, do something spectacular. We've done it here in Bristol a few times with our great friends from Fairshare Southwest. This is actually in Bristol, feeding 5,000 people with food that would have otherwise been wasted, and giving it away for free and getting everyone, this is College Green, recognise it, all you Bristolians. Dominic, you were there, I think, on this particular occasion. And yeah, you get people like the high-level Dominic Hoggs sitting next to students and homeless people and grassroots organisations and other policyholders. We all share a meal and we say, look, actually, we're going to take food waste off the menu. We've done them around the world now, on every continent apart from Antarctica. Any help getting there, please do tell me. It's an important place, becoming more important. We've done it in Africa, disco soup. These guys really got it. This is like a feeding of 5,000, but with music, and you dance. Kenyans love to party, love to dance. You galvanise that public opinion, and then you can show, with surveys, things like this. 53% of people actually care about this. And that is what makes the supermarket bosses jump and change their policies, and that is indeed what happened with the beans. This photograph was taken when we were saying we'd only got halfway, but it was significant. Tesco stopped using the 9-centimetre punnets. They stopped topping and tailing the beans and only started topping them. Wow, 50% of the way. We met some of the Kenyan suppliers on our next visit who said that single policy change, which happened overnight, I had a conversation with Matt Simmerster. The bit in the conversation where he was most uncomfortable is when I showed him those bean trimmings. He said, we'll change it overnight. And they did. That cut waste by 30% overnight. And on that single thing alone, I calculated that 0.04% of the entire Kenyan economy could be saved purely from the export of green beans to Europe by going from topping and tailing to topping. It's bonkers. Anyway, a few weeks ago, don't know if you saw it, they're not trimming the beans at all anymore. You go, oh, but whole beans. You can decide whether a bean has to have a tail or a top. Amazing. Feed the trimmings to your goats. Listen, I've always been not that troubled by topping. Some people will say, you know, obviously you've got that in a mass source, you can feed it to your goats in Kenya or whatever, makes no sense to fly. And, you know, I'm agnostic, topping or tailing. But you do not need to trim a bean to exactly 9 centimetres. That I will hold to. And I think we are getting somewhere. I can't remember how long you want me to talk to you because we all started a little bit late. Do you want me to carry on or do you want me to get off?
What do you want us to do? Just to tell you to boo and hiss when we're...
Yeah, boo and hiss when you've had enough of me. That's good.
No, you're good. You're good. We are late. I think what we're going to do, we're going to 10 minutes? Can you do? Have you got
10 minutes, but I need the challenge at the end question. So I'll talk for another 5.
Well,
or you want me to talk for another 10? I'll just carry on, see what happens. Stop me if you want to. Another thing that we do, which is again totally pointless if you look at just the number of cabbages that we save thereby, but very pointful if you look at the overall way in which you can use this kind of activity as a platform to convey your fundamental objectives. We do this gleaning network. It's around the UK. We've seeded the gleaning network in several European countries now. No one was doing this before, taking volunteers to fields where all of those products are being wasted and getting it into organisations like Fairshare, good fresh fruits and vegetables for free for those organisations, just where they need it most. And we have, this is now out of date, but it's 2 million portions of healthy, nutritious fruit and vegetables, and loads of people having good fun, and more to the point, a nice televisable opportunity for Jamie Oliver and you, Fanny Whittingstall, to come gleaning with us and send that out to the millions of people who buy these pumpkins and who can tell the supermarkets that they buy them from that they don't care whether they are slightly wonky or not. Indeed, that makes them better Halloween masks. Don't forget to eat your pumpkin pudding afterwards. So, to come on to the email that I sent Dominic years ago, going, he had worked out what the resource potential of turning bio-waste in the UK into heat and electricity through anaerobic digestion would be. And it was great, perfect piece of work. Despite his name, he didn't mention pigs once. And I will never forgive you for that, Dominic. Because...
I need to interrupt. There's one thing Tristram did. When they passed that animal byproducts regulation...
Stand up, because no one can hear you. Roving mic, please. Raving mic.
So when they passed the animal byproducts regulation, which in my personal view is one of the most dim pieces of legislation ever passed, and I actually went to The Hague and I did a presentation to the European Commission. I had all of the people in the health side there.
Yeah.
And I genuinely never thought that legislation would be passed. It was bonkers, utterly bonkers. And I kill myself back in 2001 for not taking it more seriously. For some reason that legislation got passed, and they passed it on the basis of a risk assessment. And I went to The Hague and I pulled apart that risk assessment. The risk assessment, basically, they said, this is the whole reason why you can't compost. At the time, you couldn't compost and digest food waste. And the reason was because there was a risk assessment done. It was done on a sphere of pork. I calculated that sphere of pork that they were looking at, if you looked at the density of pork, was equivalent to half a carcass. So the assumption was that, Charlie, you were going to take into your compost plant half a carcass of a pig, and you were going to let it into your plant without doing anything to it. It was completely stupid. The whole situation was coloured by all of the classical swine fever, BSE, all of the, and there were some crazy decisions that got made there, and we still living with that.
Absolutely.
And we need. How are we close to changing that?
No, we're not close to it. This is Europe. I tell you where.
It's DEFRA, it's not bloody Europe, it's DEFRA.
Well,
it started with DEFRA, but now it's a European piece of legislation, and we have to undo both in order to get back.
I apologise.
Dominic, I forgive you now. Because Dominic is, as you have just heard, totally on side with the pig idea, which is the campaign that Feedback, my organisation, launched precisely to take on that look. Well, to do two things. Firstly, within the regulation to say, look, there's a lot of food waste that is legally permissible, but which is currently not being used as livestock feed because people don't know you can do it. And why don't they know that you can do it? Because the local authorities don't know what the law is. And we went around a whole bunch of local authorities, even chief vets were getting the law wrong and saying, you can't feed that to pigs, you can't feed that to pigs. Actually, this is the law. You are going well beyond your remit, so we went to the government, and they realised that these local authorities were going well beyond their remit. That has now changed. A lot of opportunities are now being picked up for backhauling, for example, bakery waste from supermarkets, etc., to get it into livestock feed, which is the next best option after human consumption, bar one, which I'm going to come to right at the very end, I have discovered since. And how did we campaign on this? Not just by writing a document, which of course we did, but by feeding a small herd of pigs in the centre of London with food waste, legally permissible food waste that we sourced from within a kilometre of Stepney City Farm, stuff like this kind of bread waste and various other fruits and vegetables and yummy stuff that pigs absolutely love. And then instead of feeding 5,000 people with chopped up wonky vegetables, we fed 5,000 people with chopped up delicious pigs fed on food waste. And got huge headlines, got some of the really great chefs behind this campaign. Why did we do it as a public-facing thing? Because surprisingly, although you're absolutely right that animal health is technically speaking the big block, when you look at what the FSA actually discussed in their deliberations on the first deregulatory step on the TSE roadmap, namely allowing chicken byproducts to go to pigs and pig byproducts to go to chickens, it was principally public opinion. Since when was the FSA tasked with taking public opinion as their mandate? Doesn't matter. Public opinion. The public won't want it, and if the public don't want it, the supermarkets won't let the producers do it because they won't want to see food waste recycling pigs. And so we said, nonsense. The public in Europe are perfectly capable of understanding this is what pigs and chickens were domesticated for. Feeding them anything else is frankly bonkers. Chopping down the Amazon rainforest to grow soy and shipping that across the Atlantic to protect animal health when it's clearly the single biggest way of undermining planetary health is madness. And so that's what the pig idea was about. And that is how you turn 100 million tons of waste into Germany, because in the middle of the pig idea campaign, I met a great PhD candidate called Erasmus Sumgarsen. Oh, got his name wrong. Great guy. He said, what can I do? I'm doing a PhD on biodiversity impacts. Calculate. I was saying, we could save the rainforests if we fed food waste to pigs again, replacing soy and all these other feeds that we're currently using with stuff that is currently waste. And he said, okay, I'll go away and calculate. He calculated that 1.8 million hectares of land could be saved if you used food waste again in the way that it's currently banned in Europe to feed pigs instead, 250,000 hectares of which is rainforest and savanna in South America. Huge opportunity for making loads of money. This is taking me back to when I was a 15-year-old feeding food waste to my pigs and selling it to my school friends' parents on a mega scale. Anyway, that's the pig idea. Now, until last year, my advice to these people, this is a sandwich manufacturer making sandwiches for the UK supermarkets. And when I first saw this, I said, they were sending it to landfill. Then they got really excited because they did what Dominic had told everyone to do, which is send it to AD. And they were paying £100 a tonne, no, £80 a tonne to send it off for AD, something like 100 kilometres away. They were so pleased they weren't landfilling this bread anymore. And we visited and we said, you are handling all of these slices. These are the crusts that they don't want on the sandwiches, right? Obviously, we should eat those crusts, but failing that, we said, look, these sandwiches are being handled, these slices are being handled completely separately from your meat contents. The law allows you to segregate it and to send it for livestock feed. Within weeks, they were sending it to a farmer 2 miles down the road and selling it for £20 a tonne, saving £100 a tonne. Boom! Hundreds of thousands of quid saved. 13,000 slices of bread every day out of that factory. Anyway, so my advice until last year, has been to do that. But then, talk about Belgian beer, I totally agree. Belgian beer is the solution to a lot of things. Belgians in Brussels were brewing this beer out of waste bread. They call it Babylon because that is the origin of beer, using waste stuff and fermenting it and preserving those calories for future seasons. And I just thought, it's really cool that an artisan brewer is doing it in his whole mix of artisan beer. How cool would it be if I funded my charity by setting up a company making beer out of waste bread and then spreading it, open sourcing it amongst what is now a global movement of food waste activists and craft beer makers. So we launched Toast Ale, and it's obviously got drunk. And so are you going to be, because there is some to drink later. This morning, I sat in bed with my 3-year-old and read The Giant Jam Sandwich. Do you know that one? Know that one? And I feel like we've got to the other, talking about bread, Ray, got to the end of that sandwich, and it's a good sandwich. It's full of stingy wasps. See, this is the story where they get a big slice of bread to trap all the wasps, and then they flop the slice of bread on top, so they trap all the wasps, so they stop being a pest. If that book had been written now, I'm thinking the giant jam sandwiches, which is the size of a field, would just be sort of left there to rot or sent to an AD plant, or any number to make electricity for 50 homes or something. And I'm so pleased that at the end, when I first read this story, I was thinking, what are they going to do with the sandwich? Please don't teach my daughter to waste jam sandwiches. Sure enough, the final lines are, the birds flew off with it in their beaks and had a feast for 100 weeks. And I think that is the thing to remember, is that all of these problems have within it this delicious jam sandwich. We can eat our way out of this problem. We have to celebrate our way out of this problem. We have to have a better party than the people who are doing what we don't need to happen. And that's what I think is going to happen later in the evening. We're going to show that Eunomians are utopians and know how to enjoy themselves. It's been a great honour to be here, Dominic.